Hi, everybody. Matt here from Matt Likes Comics. There is a book out there from DC that doesn't get the love that it should, considering that for the vast majority of its run, it pairs two of DC's biggest characters, if not the two biggest DC characters. That book is called World's Finest. Now, there is a current series called Batman Superman World's Finest that goes back to its Silver Age roots. It has stories with characters we haven't seen in a long time, and it has stories that have a very big Silver Age feel to it, which made me start thinking I really like World's Finest, especially the Silver Age, but I also like some of the books that continue into it. World's Finest started as World's Best Comics #1 back in. Sorry, I'm going to check a book here that I didn't grab. Yes, started as World's Best Comics #1, and this was a result of the World's Fair Comics. Now, World's Finest started as another anthology title, and in this case, the two stars were Superman and Batman in different stories. My friend, the immortal Biggie Shack, has World's Finest 2 when they switched the name from World's Best Comics to World's Finest Comics. The series went until 1986, just after the crisis, and ended with issue 323. I'm not sure of the month. I don't have the book. I thought I did. Turns out I don't. Guess what's going on? Anyway, World's Finest started with Batman and Superman having separate stories in a 96-page book that was 15 cents at the time. But with issue 71 and the cost of paper bringing things down, World's Finest became a 10-cent magazine, and they combined the Superman and Batman stories into one where they teamed up. The first Batman Superman team up was in Superman 71, but World's Finest 76 had them become a team on a monthly basis. Sometimes Robin was with them during the 50s for sure. Robin was with them a lot, but once the 1960s started, the stories were just Batman, Superman alone in a lot of places. World's Finest was also a title that they used to do a lot of these imaginary stories in the 60s. And in these cases, the imaginary stories, of course, were with Batman and Superman. So, I am going to show you a bunch of the books I have from the World's Finest era, starting with my oldest book, and I'm going to go to the 25-cent era with the books I have. For the most part, World's Finest had Superman and Batman together, but there was a period in the late 60s, early 70s when Batman had moved to Brave and the Bold team ups that they started partnering Superman with other heroes as a sort of a precursor to DC Comics Presents, which came out from 1978 to 1987. And so they had other Superman would be team up with Green Lantern or the Flash and other things. They were always Superman team ups. However, once they got them back together, and for a little while they did this thing called the Super Sons, where Batman and Superman had married, had children, and these sons were now teenagers trying to become Batman Jr. and Superman Jr. The Super Sons did not exist in regular canon, but they were referenced again once Superman and Batman had Damian and Jonathan Kent. And there was a Super Son series briefly a couple years ago. What I like about the World's Finest is throughout the whole thing, Batman and Superman act like they're best buddies. They can lean on each other. And for both people who are very alone in the world, they need that. It's good that they had that friendship. And I'm glad that today there's still a comic that shows this. Even though Batman and Superman's personalities have gone differently, they respect each other and they're still friends. And I like that very much. So the first book I've got for you is my oldest one. This is World's Finest 82, where Batman, Superman, and Robin become the three super musketeers. Next up, we have World's Finest 131. I bought this because my friend Alan was looking for it and it made me want it. This one has Superman and Batman as fat, blimpy floaty things on the cover. Robin is unaffected, as you can see in the back. This for me was I will admit, an Alan influenced book, but it's not a bad little story. Another thing to note about World's Finest was the book that Curt Swan really started in. He started doing the Batman Superman features and then moved on to regular Superman. So there are a lot of Curt Swan stories in this era. This is World's Finest 159, where the Cape and Crowell crooks take over. Next up, we have World's Finest 164, where Batman and Superman see their friendship challenged, and they need to apparently kill somebody by the name of Genia. Read this book because it's an interesting ending. Next up, this is a book we did in our book club a while back. This is one of the imaginary stories I was talking about. This is World's Finest 167. Now, I read this for the first time in one of those Blue Ribbon digests as a reprint for Superman. And you might say that it was an obsession after that. This was the first issue of World's Finest I bought when I got back into comic books because I just needed to have this. This story is just so good. Plus, it's go-go checks. You can't go wrong with go-go checks. Next up, we have the second appearance of the composite Superman, who is not on the cover at all. But the entire book is the story. So I don't know where this comes from, this cover. But it is a nice cover. This is World's Finest 168. This next book is interesting for one different reason. This is World's Finest 169, and it's only the third overall appearance of Batgirl. She had made 2 appearances in Detective Comics before this. This was her first non-detective comic appearance. And the interesting part about it is if you read the story, it's not even Batgirl. Here's the cover. The Batmobile has lost its wheels while Superman and Batgirl fly away. Supergirl and Batgirl fly away. It's an interesting, and I bought this originally because, of course, it's Supergirl on the cover, but the story was really funny, and it was only later I discovered it was the third appearance of Batgirl. Next up is another one of those imaginary stories. This is World's Finest 172. And the premise in this one is what if Batman, Bruce Wayne, had been adopted by the Kents after the incident that took his parents? It is one of the best honestly one of the best stories around. That I got another good one that I remember reading from my uncle's collection, and that I was glad to get, because in the end, Batman joins the Legion of Superheroes. Remember, it's an imaginary story. Next up, my last 12 center for the world's finest is number 178. Superman has apparently been a has been, and so Green Arrow is hanging out with Batman. And Superman has this robot buddy. This one has a nice twist to it, so if you have a chance to read it, you really should. Next one I'm going to show is World's Finest 186. Once we get to the late 60s, early 70s, and on, we get a lot of silly stuff where Batman and Superman need to either damage or kill the other one. And this begins with Batman in the Stockade. What the cover doesn't really show, oh yes it does in the background, okay, there's pilgrims, is this was a time travel story where they go back to the time of the Salem witch trials. So yes, the Puritans are in the background. Next up here is just, it is a reprint book. It's one of the Giants, but you can't go wrong. I love the Giants. I love the 80-page Giants from the 60s and the early 70s. I would like to get a full run of them. They are difficult to find in any shape because, of course, the spines are those glue spines and not the regular stapled ones. This one is one that I got that actually has the entire spine together, so I'm very happy for that. One, again, World's Finest 188. And most of the stories it reprints is from the early 60s. This year, the next couple ones are from the era where I talked about where Superman was with other heroes because they moved Batman over. This comes from the I cross out the real price collection pedigree, and this is issue 213, where Superman is teamed up with the Atom. As you can see, somebody crossed out the 20 and put 10 cents. So I'm thinking that they sold it at a yard sale or something. And the second one I'm going to show is another interesting team up. It's World's Finest 214, Superman and the original Vigilante. Greg Saunders. No, it's not the CSI Greg Saunders. It's an actual comic character. Next up, we have one of the ones from the Super Sons era that I was talking about. This one is issue 215. I believe this is the first Super Sons in World's Finest. I don't think I don't think that was their first appearance, but it's their first appearance in World's Finest. And here it is, where they're making their declaration that they're going to be better than their parents. And it says right there at the bottom, Saga of the Super Sons. Meanwhile, back in the Fortress of Solitude. Sorry. Next, we're back to sort of normal here. If this cover had been cut better, I would have thought of sending this, because this book is in really good shape otherwise. But the cover cuts, it may be trimmed a little bit, and I'm worried about that. This is World's Finest 217. I got it because it's got this awesome Metamorpho cover, where Metamorpho is dressed similar to the Composite Superman. The Composite Superman, as you probably may have guessed by my talking about it, is one of my favorite villains for Superman and Batman. And a lot of that is because his powers are the powers of the Legion of Superheroes. One of these days, I'm going to get around to making a composite Superman video. But, I'm split about that. Part of me wants to take it from the Batman side. Part of me wants to take it from the Superman side. It's confusing. Next up is Superman and Batman in World's Finest 220. I would say that this is the first appearance of Killer Croc if I didn't know the story. And if I didn't know that Killer Croc didn't show up till 1983. Because the Killer Croc character is actually the girl in the painting. This is another story, though, another book that I think people should read if they like gothic horror. This is a horror book without being in a horror title. So this one here, World's Finest 220, if you like a superhero horror tale, pick it up. And the last book I'm going to show is World's Finest 234. This one has the Daily Planet title that says Superman and Batman Quit Earth. And sure enough, on the cover, they're showing Batman and Superman taking off in front of the moon, and they're leaving Earth forever. If you read the book, it's just a ploy. It's not obviously not real because, like sitcoms, comic books go, for generally speaking, to, back to the beginning of the original look. So this is my look at 1950s, because that first book was from the 50s. Because, as I said, number 76 was the first one that they started teaming up together, and this was issue 82, so it wasn't far afterwards. But this is my collection, my current collection of World Finest from the 50s to the early 70s. I could have kept going, but I have a ton of them from the late 70s and to the end of the run. So that could take an hour. And maybe you want to spend time. Maybe you'd like to take the hour. I don't know. What I can do is say, if you like this video, comment below if you'd like to see a part 2. As I know for certain, I've got more World Finest books on the way. I think I've got 3 coming in my next order from. And also, it is a series that I really like. And had I not been concentrating more on action and Supergirl, I might have actually concentrated on this particular series because it's one of my favorite series of all time. So anyways, if you like this video, please hit like, subscribe, comment below. I'd really love to hear about it. If you've read any of these books, I'd like to hear what your impressions are, because these stories are fun. They have various writers over the years. Bob Haney from Brave and the Bold fame did the Super Sons era. And that's one of the reasons why it's not in the regular continuity, because first of all, it takes place a few years later. And the best part about the Super Sons is you never see who the mothers are throughout the entire run. They're always in silhouette. Although there are times you kind of think it's Catwoman and Lois because of the way the silhouettes are, but I digress. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed yourself today. My name's Matt, and I like comics. And I hope you do too.